Hi everybody, welcome, welcome. Please say hello in the comments so I know that you're here, and we'll get started shortly. All right. So I have my cookbook open to one of the recipes we're doing today, corn chowder. If you want to follow along in the cookbook, it's page 129, and it's also on the website, and I have put the link there above with this post. Okay, I see some people. Hi, you guys. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Dora. Feel free to say hi in the comments if you like. You can say where you're from. You could say what your favorite recipe is. I just like to know you're there so I can connect with you. That's kind of the whole fun of this live stuff, so we can connect. Hi, Debbie. Alrighty. Hey, Libby from True North. Yeah, it's corn season. Hi, Karen. Hey, Nate. Thanks for watching. Okay. All right. So we've got quite a few people watching at this point, so I guess I'll go ahead and get started. If you are new to my cooking demos, welcome. My name is Kathy Fisher, and I've been doing these cooking videos every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And if you're not, this is the recipe we're doing today, but if you're not familiar with my cookbook, it's called Straight Up Food. Straight Up Food. And you can get it on Amazon or my website. My website is straightupfood.com. And yeah, I know lots of you already have this cookbook, so, but I always got to plug it because it's my baby. It's a cookbook that I self-published, so I could make it exactly the way I wanted, including a cookbook that lays flat, which is the best. It's got lots of pictures. It is 100% plants, no added salt, oil, or sugar, and it also is gluten-free. And it's just great for people who are beginners. There's lots of support information in here. There's lots of little notes. If you can't do nuts, do this instead. So as a teacher, I'm always getting these questions about the recipes. So I try to anticipate the biggest questions and put them in the notes there, or answer them in the notes. There's also a lot of support. I call them support articles in the back. Let me look at the table of contents. Things like how to cook without oil, how to make salad dressings, how to read a food label, how to do menu planning and grocery shopping, and eating out at restaurants and people's houses. So there's a lot of great information in this book, and there's some info at the front about why I eat this way. I've been plant-based for over 20 years now, and I've been teaching cooking classes at True North Health Center and the McDougall program, both in Santa Rosa, California, for about 10 years. So since I'm not going into work, I've been doing cooking videos from my home here, and it's been really fun. So I will set this aside if you guys have any questions about the book. It's also in Kindle and digital and all of that. So thank you, and if you already have it, please leave a brief review on Amazon. That really helps us authors out. Okay. Now the way this works is I'm going to make 2 recipes for you today. And if you have any questions or comments, just put them in the comments there on Facebook, and I will answer them. So I'll just take little breaks, and I'll go over here on my laptop and check them out, and I'll answer all of your questions. So let's see. Let me see if there's any questions to begin with. There probably aren't, but I just want to see what's going on over here. Hey, Janet. 2 Janets in a row there. Hi, Cara. Hi, Susie. Thank you for the comments about the cookbook. If you go to Amazon, there's lots of pictures of the cookbook. You can see, if you're curious what the inside looks like, you can get the preview. Hi, VG. Hi, Marie. Hi, Nectaria. Hi, Debbie. Hi, Gina. So many people. Hi, Lisa. This is great. Okay. So lots of hellos. And as your questions pop up, just put them over there and I'll check in a little bit later. Okay. So we are going to start. So we're making corn chowder today since it's corn season in a lot of places, especially around here in California. So we're going to make the corn chowder first since that has to cook on the stovetop. And while that's finishing up, we will do the cornbread. So I'm using my portable stove here, so I don't have to have my back to you over at my oven there. And I'm going to get my big old Le Creuset up here. And I'm going to turn it on kind of medium high. We're going to be sauteing some onions, so we want the heat pretty high. Now, whenever I don't use any oil, as I said earlier, so I always just put a little bit of water in the bottom. And isn't this cute? I don't have this on my website store, but it's a little shot glass that is a measuring cup for just little bits of stuff. So just put like a tablespoon or two of water in the bottom, and then when the water starts sputtering and boiling a little bit, then you'll know that it's nice and hot and ready for your onions. So it is not uncommon to saute onions by themselves first. What that does is it really intensifies the flavor, it calms down the bitterness of the onion, and it brings out the sweetness. Now this happens to be a sweet onion to begin with, not a regular yellow onion, but a sweet onion. You can use either one. I'm very into substitutions and variations depending on what you have, if you're feeling creative and you want to use something else. So this is one medium large onion that I've just chopped up here. You could use a white onion, you could use a red onion. I'm going to go ahead and dump this in while I'm talking. And you might be able to hear that. It's kind of sizzling already. And I like to remind people, don't discard a recipe or pass it by just because you don't have one ingredient. I mean, if you didn't have corn, that might be a problem. But if you only had a red onion or a white onion and not a yellow onion, you can totally use that. Okay. So this is called sauteing. Sauteing just means cooking while stirring frequently or constantly. I always add a little bit of water in the beginning. Some people don't add any water in the beginning, and that's called dry sauteing. You can do that as well. The less water, the more flavor you're going to get. The only thing with dry sauteing, I'm kind of doing that right now, is you got to keep an eye on it so it doesn't burn. And if you do see that it's starting to stick or it's browning too quickly, just add a little bit more water. I hope my camera's over there. That won't steam up. All right. Now, if you're feeling kind of lazy and you didn't want to do the saute step, you could just skip it. Put the 5 cups of water in, the onion, all the other stuff that we're going to add in. But this just adds a little extra flavor to your chowder. And since we're not using added salt, we're all about getting flavor from in other ways. So just because I don't use salt doesn't mean this food isn't going to taste good. It's still going to have flavor, because if I made recipes that didn't taste good without salt, nobody would eat them. So trust me, this is going to taste great. Now, if you're a person who uses salt every day and you shake salt on your food at every meal, and then you have this, yeah, your taste buds and your brain are going to let you know, like, ooh, there's no salt there, and it's going to miss it. But the longer that you go without salt, your taste buds will adjust and you won't miss it so much. I don't ever use added salt to my food, and I don't miss it at all. Okay. So you want to just saute these till they're kind of, see how they're getting kind of translucent and soft looking. That's what we're going for. So it generally takes like 3 to 5 minutes. All right. Now we are going to add 5 cups of water. Okay, and then we're going to add This is 3 ribs of celery. Can you see that? 3 ribs of celery. Is that 3 ribs of celery? I gotta check. I don't want to give you the wrong info. 3 ribs of celery and about 2 medium carrots. And then this is 2.5 cups of corn kernels. And I'll show you what kind of corn I used here in a sec. So we're just gonna put all of this in there. Okay, and as you can see, I cut my pieces, my celery and my carrots a little on the small side, because when I think of chowder, I think of small pieces. If you want to cut yours a little bigger, you can. But since the corn is kind of on the small side, just for visual appeal, I wanted the other things to be kind of small too. All right. Ooh, that looks good. We're going to add in some dried herbs and spices. So this is 1.5 teaspoons of granulated garlic. If you only had garlic powder or minced garlic, something like that, you could definitely use that. If you wanted to throw in some fresh chopped garlic, you could do that. You would want to use more, maybe like a tablespoon. But for soups and stews, I really like using the dried stuff. It just gives a nicer, deeper flavor. So this is the garlic, the granulated garlic that I use from Savory Spice. This is my local favorite spice shop. I've been ordering online since the stores are closed, but if you buy your spices at the spice shop instead of the grocery store, they're going to be more flavorful and fresher. All right, so this is 1 tablespoon of dried green Italian herbs, and that's what that looks like. I use a lot of this, so I get big bags. And in my book, I talk all about which are the herbs and spices that I use most often. So I have, I think, a little list. These are the ones I use most every day. These are the ones I use less often. And these are the ones that I just keep on hand for like holidays and stuff like that. And then how long to keep them, how to store them, all that kind of stuff. And then last, this is a little fresh rosemary. 1 teaspoon, chopped very finely. This is rosemary if you're not familiar with it. I grow it in my backyard. It grows very easily. You can buy it at the store in little bunches or the little clamshell plastic containers. And what you do with rosemary when it's fresh is you just grab it by the top and then you pull down to get the leaves off. All right. This smells so good. I wish you were here so you could smell it. And then we're going to add in some potatoes. Let me double check, 1.5 pounds of white potatoes. These are Yukon Gold potatoes, but you could use russet or red potatoes. I do like to peel mine because I don't like potato skins. It's just a personal preference in my soups and stews. Sometimes they separate from the potato and then they're just floating around in there. And I'm not wild about that. If you want to, those are kind of bigger than I usually cut my potatoes. I usually cut them like half that big. I don't know why I went so big today. But the smaller your pieces, the faster your stew will get done as well. And as I said earlier, I like the small pieces for the celery and the carrot and also for the potatoes. All right, and then the last thing I believe is a little bit of nutmeg, which is very traditional for corn chowder. The rosemary is very traditional and the nutmeg is very traditional. Now usually nutmeg is used in like breakfast stuff or desserts, but it goes really well in this soup. All right, so this is what a nutmeg looks like. They're kind of funny looking and they're really hard and they're like little rocks. You can get this pre-ground if you want. I like to grind mine myself. It's just a little more flavorful. So this is a microplane, and what I'm going to use, I'm going to do that right here. You can't see that up close right now, but I'm going to do about, what does it say, 1 teaspoon. So I'm just going to estimate about 1 teaspoon of nutmeg. And then this is a bench scraper, or it's also called a pastry scraper, and I love it to pick up my chopped onions, my nutmeg here, clean off my cutting board into the sink. These are great, and this is on my website. If you go to straightupfood.com and click on store, you'll see my favorite kitchen tools there. All right, so that is everything. We're basically done. We're just gonna let this cook with the lid on at medium low until the carrots, the celery, and the potatoes are all nice and tender. And then we will come back and we will finish it up after we do the cornbread. Oh, and I also want to say, or show you, this is the corn that I used. I used frozen corn this time, even though we're just starting to get organic corn on the cob in the stores. I just use this frozen corn. You can use corn on the cob, just cut those kernels right off, put them in there. It's great. So I always get organic if I'm doing corn, because corn can be a GMO product. So make sure it says organic and that it only has corn in it, no added salt or oil or anything weird like that. So I use two different kinds, the Whole Foods brand and this other brand. You can also use canned corn if you want. Just check that label, make sure it doesn't have sugar added to it, a bunch of salt added to it if you're trying to avoid salt. And I think that's everything in the recipe. Let me just double check. Okay, and let me check on the comments to see if you guys have any great questions for me. How many quarts is your Dutch oven? Oh, someone asked me that last time. I think it's, I don't remember. 6? 5? Something like that. I think it's on my website. Hi, Ian Sandy. Okay. 5.5. Okay. Yep. Regine says, I just received the millet and the cardamom to make your blueberry muffins. Oh, yeah, those blueberry muffins are great. Okay. I love the knife on the website. Oh, yeah, I have a couple great knives on my website. Do you just use water instead of veggie broth? Yes, for a reason. I haven't gotten through all the comments, but I'll stop and answer this one. So I only use water instead of vegetable broth for a couple reasons. One of the reasons is I'm cheap and I don't want to buy vegetable broth in those boxes from the store. The other reason, I think they taste kind of funny. And the last reason is because starting with water, you're putting all the produce in there, you're putting the dried herbs and spices and the fresh rosemary and all this stuff in there. By the end, it's going to taste great. So you don't really need to add flavor. None of my recipes are made with veggie broth in mind, and they're all going to taste great. If you want to use vegetable broth, you can instead of water. It's totally up to you. They're usually loaded with a lot of salt, so just make sure that if you're trying to avoid salt, that it doesn't have too much in it or any. Okay. Hey, there's James Adam Gabbard. Hey. All right. So many people. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm still seeing people I haven't said hi to from earlier. Okay. Hi, Debbie. Debbie from Dallas. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Amy. Angela and Tina. Hi, Lucy. Hey, Tammy. Tammy from Texas. I like those alliterations. Hey, Denise. Okay, I might be caught up here. Hey, Daryl. Oh, yeah, and Tammy's reminding me, you can make your own veggie broth if you want. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I usually kind of throw that into my spiel about veggie broth. But if you want to make your own veggie broth from the ends of the celery and the carrots and the kind of the leftovers from your veggies, you can totally do that. And there is a recipe in my cookbook for veggie broth. It's the only recipe that is not mine in the cookbook. And Jeff Novick graciously allowed me to use his veg broth recipe. Okay. Hi, Lisa. Hey, Kay. Okay. What is the source for your spices? Asked Sharon. Hi, Sharon. The source for my spices most often is the Savory Spice Shop. Where I live, we have Savory Spice Shops, and then we have Penzeys. And I go to Penzeys too, but in my immediate town, we only have a savory, so I tend to go there more often. They have a great selection of salt-free blends, and they have a lot of organic options. And they're just, if you've never been to a spice shop, Google your town or your county and spice shop and check it out. It's really fun to go in there and see all the options. It's so much better than a grocery store. Sometimes I still pop into the grocery store to get something if going to the spice shop just isn't convenient. But a spice shop is like a candy store. It's just so much fun if you like cooking and you like spices. And people that work there are always so nice and helpful. And it's just a fun little field trip. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on this. You don't have to put the lid on, but putting the lid on helps generate more energy and gets it to cook a little bit faster. So I'm going to put that lid on, maybe turn it down just a hair. And then I'm going to switch out my ingredients here so we can work on the cornbread. All right, let me think. So my plan was to move this with the oven mitts on just over a little bit since there's nothing to see there. And then we'll come back to that. I'll move it back a little bit later. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get set up for the cornbread. The cornbread is not on my website, straightupfood.com, no, it is on the website. It's not in the cookbook because it's a newer recipe. The cookbook came out about 3.5 years ago, but this is one of my newer recipes. There is a cornbread in the cookbook called quinoa cornbread. That one's really good too, but I just felt like making this one today, the pumpkin-walnut cornbread. So let me get my ingredients. Look how organized I am, just like a cooking show. I guess this is a cooking show. Okay. Do I want everything to stay on the tray? Sure. We'll just leave it that way and see if that works. Whoop, see if that works. All righty. This soup is boiling away, so I'm going to turn it down just a little tiny bit more. This portable oven cooks like crazy, much better than my regular stovetop, I guess because it's a flame. Sometimes people ask me what's the brand of my portable cooktop. It's a Winco, W-I-N-C-O. There's so many different types. I didn't compare them all and choose this one. I just chose that one. So, but it's been great. It takes those butane canisters for fuel. All right. So we are going to do the cornbread, and we're going to go ahead and get our pan ready first. This is an 8x8 pan. And we are going to line it with parchment paper. I did this last week when I did the baked oatmeal, but I'm going to show you again how to do this. So this is parchment paper. It's sold where they sell aluminum foil and saran wrap, and nothing sticks to it, and it can go in the oven. And the reason that we use this is so we don't have to oil and flour our pan. If you have a silicone pan, you can use that without the parchment paper. Parchment paper is just paper that's coated in a food-grade silicone. So what you do is you pull enough out to cover the bottom and the sides. All right, so I'm going to set this aside just for a sec, and we are going to fold this into quarters. Now there's many different ways to line a pan with parchment paper, but this is the one that I found is most most easy. Okay. So once you have that, you take your center right here and you just line it up with the center of the pan and you hold it there with your thumb. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just kind of generally line it up. And then crease the edges right into that corner with your fingernail. So when it comes off, you can see it. Then, if you don't want all this stuff hanging over, you can leave it hanging over if you want. But I like to, you know me, I like to be a little precise. All right, make it look good. So cut off any excess, and then in the free corners here, we're just gonna make 2 cuts. This is like origami. And then you open it up. Just push it into your pan. There you go. Stay down. Okay. So our pan's all ready. I'm gonna set this aside just for a sec. And my soup is still going crazy over here. I'm just gonna move the lid off to the side a little so it can breathe. All right. And let me just check in with comments. Make sure I'm not getting behind. Parchment paper lesson, yeah. We'll end up with a veggie broth. It becomes the veggie broth. Just strain it. Okay. Hi, Andy. Hi, Yes. Hi from True North. Hey, Sybil from Canada. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Teresa. Hey, Lisa from South Texas. Okay. So now we will do our batter. And you don't need an, well, I'm not quite at that point. Let me set that aside. So how much can you guys see? Just my cutting board there. All right. So we are going to start with, I'm going to do the dry stuff first. So we're going to do 1 cup of just regular rolled oats. And whenever I need flour, I just make my own flour. I don't buy flour anymore, or very rarely. And because I'm gluten-free, or my recipes are gluten-free, I use oats a lot. I will use millet sometimes, quinoa sometimes, and that's about it as far as flours go. So I'm going to do 1 cup. And interestingly, 1 cup of oats like this is the same once it's ground up. So if you do only have store-bought oat flour, it's the same measurement, 1 cup. So since my Vitamix is way over there, I'm just going to leave it over there and blend it and then bring this back because I don't want to move it by this boiling pot. So I'm just going to grind it for like 10 seconds until it looks like flour. And there you have it. There's your oat flour. It always likes to stick at the bottom. There we go. All right, so we've got our oat flour. What is our next dry ingredient? Cornmeal. So 1.5 cups of cornmeal. Now, there's a story here. You guys tell me in the comments if this has been happening to you. It seems like cornmeal is not easy to find anymore. Just regular cornmeal. It seems like there was always just cornmeal. There wasn't the medium grind and the coarse grind. There was just cornmeal. And now and this happened many times, I'll go to look for cornmeal and I only see the medium grind and the coarse grind, or I find this flour, corn flour. But just the regular cornmeal, which is between a flour and a medium grind, is so hard to find. So I thought, well, and I looked at this, there's like the little window right there, and I thought, well, that looks like cornmeal, because I made a batch of this last night. And so I used this, and I it didn't turn out well. It didn't rise, it didn't turn out well. So I made another batch this morning because I wanted to be able to show you the finished product. And it turned out better, but it still wasn't, the texture in the middle was not good. So this leads me to believe that corn flour is not a substitute for cornmeal. I'm still going to show you how I do it, but this is not what you want to use. So use cornmeal. If you can only find, and this is what I should have done, if you can only find medium grind or coarse grind cornmeal, then grind it in your Vitamix. Grind it down a little bit. But the flour is too fine. And it produced, and I'll show you a little later, it produced a result that was too wet. So it didn't cook the right way in between. But I'm going to use this right now because I don't have any cornmeal. But for the purpose of this demo, this will work. So we're going to do 1.5 cups. So let me just check on the comments to make sure I said that in a understandable way. Is masa harina like polenta? Well, it's all made from corn. It's just different grind levels. So flour is the most ground. Yeah, they say masa harina is really good for tortillas, but cornbread, it is not the best. Okay. Is it cheaper to make your own oat flour or to buy it? Cheaper. I don't know how the cost adds up, but the reason that I don't buy store-bought flour is because I always have flour hanging around and it takes up space. And by the way, don't ever put your flour in the refrigerator. That moisture is not good for the flour. Just keep it down where you keep your potatoes in the dark, dry place. These oats that I use are not gluten-free, but you can certainly get gluten-free oats very easily nowadays. Hi, Sharon. Sharon already tried the corn chowder and loves it. Okay, thank you for that testimonial. Hey, Joan. Yeah, Joan says her parchment paper doesn't look that precise. I have done that at least 1,000 times. So the first time you do it, it might not go that easily, but keep doing it. It'll get easier. Can you put it in a loaf pan or muffin tins? Yeah, I wouldn't put it in a loaf pan because it's a really heavy batter, but you could use muffin tins. And you would want to use a parchment paper muffin liner. If you just use paper muffin liners, because there's no oil or butter in this, it will still stick to those paper muffin liners. So get parchment. If you were going to cook it as muffins, probably 25 to 30 minutes. Hey, Charlie. Hey, Anne. Oh, Jean, good tip. Boiling her corn cobs to give the water more flavor. Okay. What about millet flour? Oh, I think millet would work. Yeah, instead of the corn. I didn't have any millet either, so I couldn't have used that. Yeah, Arrowhead Organic Yellow Cornmeal. Yeah, it exists. It just seems like it's not showing up, or there's always an empty space where the cornmeal is. I do not know what is going on with that. Thanks, Susie. All right. Carrying on here. So don't get this. I will use that for something else. So now we're going to put in a little leavening, which will make it rise. A teaspoon of baking powder. Oh, and I didn't get out my measuring spoons. There's always one thing that I'm forgetting. These are my lovely magnetic measuring spoons that stick together because there's a magnet right here. These are on my website store if you're interested. So we are going to do 1 teaspoon of baking powder. You know cornbread, it's kind of heavy, so we need to help it rise. This is Rumford baking powder. Doesn't have any of that aluminum stuff in it. It's not a sodium-free baking powder though, so if you do want sodium-free, there's a brand called Hain, H-A-I-N, that you can get. And usually I have that around, but I ran out of it. So I picked this up last night. Okay, so 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and then we're going to do 3/4 of soda. All right, 1, 2, 3. And then I like to use my whisk. You could use a fork, but whenever you have dry ingredients, you want to mix them up first before you add the wet stuff, so that baking powder and baking soda gets evenly distributed. All right. Now we're going to do the wet stuff. So again, with the Vitamix, you don't have to wash it in between since we ground the oats. So we're going to put in 1 cup of water. Now, if you wanted to use non-dairy milk to make it slightly richer, you could do that too. I try to think back sometimes, like, why did I do that instead of non-dairy milk when I was creating the recipe? And maybe because I add walnuts to this, so I was trying to maybe keep the calories down. I don't remember. Okay. Then we're going to add some dates. Generally, cornbread is sweetened a little bit. You can adjust the sweetness after you try this at home. If you want it more sweet, less sweet, just adjust the dates. So this is about 5 medjool dates that I've taken the pits out of. And if you've never bought dates, you can buy them in bulk. You can buy them like this in these little clamshell containers. You do want to make sure you take that pit out though, because they are incredibly hard. Now, I'm going to add some pumpkin to this, but what I like to do first is just blend the water and the dates, because this is pretty thick, and I like to get this processed first. So I'm going to scooch over here and do this real quick. So once the water and the dates have been mixed, we're going to put in, our pumpkin. So this is what I'm using today, organic pumpkin. If you're a person who is skilled at making your own pumpkin puree from scratch, you can do that too. But this is just straight organic pumpkin, nothing else is added. And just remember, if you're buying anything in a can, a bag, whatever, check that label to make sure you know what's in it. All right, so I'm going to add the whole can. This is a 15-ounce can. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but this is a pretty loose pumpkin puree. Sometimes in the cans it comes drier, I guess is the word I'd use. And in that case, you might need to add, well, you will need to add a little more liquid. And that's just kind of unpredictable. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because I made an extra batch, and my local little store only had the Libby's 100% pure pumpkin. And it was much drier than this other brand. So if you're making it at home and you see it's just so, the batter is so thick, go ahead and add some more water or non-dairy milk. All right, so now I'm going to blend this real quick. And there we have it. So we're going to, let me just stop and check to see if you have any questions. Hey Stan, thanks for showing up. I love using coarse grind cornmeal because it reminds me of Southern style cornbread, Bethany says. But does the coarse cornmeal cook thoroughly? I would think it would be a little too gritty, like not cooked through enough, but maybe it does. Yes, you can grind your own cornmeal. use unpopped popcorn. You know, I have a friend that did that. I've never tried that though, just to grind popcorn. Hey Bethany. Hi Diane. What about millet flour? Okay, I already talked about that one. Yeah, millet flour or ground millet is very similar to cornmeal in my opinion. Even if you grind the millet like a lot, it still stays a little bit grainy like cornmeal. So, all right, so I'm going to pour the wet into the dry, and I'm going to get my other spatula to clean out my Vitamix. Okay. All right. So the reason I'm using the pumpkin is because usually in cornbread there's a lot of oil or butter or both, and I don't use either of those things. So I have to figure out ways to add moistness, and pumpkin is a great way. Now, pumpkin might sound funny, like, ooh, pumpkin in cornbread, but it's not overpowering. It's kind of in the background, and it gives it a nice color. So just mix this until it's all that dry stuff has been mixed in. And cornbread batter is supposed to be on the thick side, but if it's looking too thick, like this is looking a tiny bit thick to me, because we want to be able to, it looks more like cookie dough. So as I said earlier, feel free to add a little bit more water. Where's my measuring cup? Or non-dairy milk to thin it out. We don't want it like pancake batter thin, but we don't want it quite this thick. Okay, and then we're going to add in the walnuts. If you don't do nuts, just skip it. Some people will add in a half cup instead of the walnuts, half cup of corn kernels. Some people even add blueberries to their cornbread. So you can always do that instead of nuts, or add a different kind of nut or seed, like sunflower seed or a pumpkin seed might be really good. Okay. And you know what? I might be adding more water because I'm not using cornmeal. I'm using the corn flour. So the recipe might be fine when you make it with the cornmeal, but this is just so thick. And I found that this morning when I made my practice batch, it was just taking so much liquid. Okay. If you want to add a little bit of cinnamon or nutmeg to your cornbread, you could do that too. All right, back to our pan. Oh, and I also wanted to mention, let me get this in the pan and then I'll mention it. Ooh. I can only think of one thing at a time here. All right. So just put it right on top of that paper. If putting food on parchment paper seems really weird to you, you'll get used to it. It works so well though. And the parchment paper, when you're all done and it's cooled a bit, you can just lift it. You can just lift it all out, put it on your cooling rack. I mean, let it cool in the pan for like 5 or 10 minutes first before you do that. Okay. And then just spread it out evenly. This is a great recipe to make around the holidays if you're not wanting like white bread or white bread rolls or white bread biscuits. This also goes really well with chili, of course, the classic. I have a great recipe in my cookbook and on my website called Southwest Stew, and I love to make this with the Southwest stew, and this also goes really well with the beefless stew. I like to do like the beefless stew, a Caesar salad, and then a little cornbread on the side. I'm not a huge bread eater. I love bread. That's the reason I'm not a huge bread eater, is because I will just eat it all. So I tend not to just buy it at the store and bring it into the house, because I'll just go crazy on it. And if you are going to get bread, just make sure you're reading that label to make sure you know what's in it. If it's in the refrigerated section or the frozen section, it's probably better for you, because it won't have as many preservatives in it. Okay. If you wanted to put a few walnuts on the top or press them into the top to make it look pretty, you could do that. All right. So there you have it. And you can see this is hanging over a little bit. You could trim it or you could leave it. It doesn't really matter. If it's really hanging out, then you want to trim it, but that's fine. So I'm just going to put that in the oven at 350 and cook that for about 40 minutes. It is a heavy bread, so it needs some time. So here's my final product. It turned out looking pretty good, but as you can see, can you see that? It's too wet. You can see the picture on my website. You can see the crumb of the cornbread better, and you can see it doesn't look like this. So this was made with the flour, so don't use the flour. Use the cornmeal. But doesn't that look pretty? So when it's done, it's going to brown a little bit around the edges. It's going to have cracks on the top. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If you like things kind of hot and spicy, my friend, colleague, Shada, suggested using some dried jalapeno chilies in the cornbread. And chilies and cornbread go well together. So if you're interested in that, again, I got this at Savory Spice. Then you can always have jalapenos on hand. I'm not a super hot and spicy person, but I thought that was a really good idea. All right. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to move the soup back over here with my oven mitts. Okay. Oh, that's looking good. Now what you want to do is just check those potatoes with a knife and make sure that they are nice and tender, which I'm sure they are. They've been boiling like crazy. So you can take a little more time with this. I tend to rush things in cooking demos just because I want to make sure that I get done in time. But you can take a little more time if you want, simmering it. Okay, that looks good. Let me just check in over here. Yeah, Linda, it's not supposed to be quite that dense, but cornbread is dense. You know, it's denser than cake. It's supposed to be dense, but it's also supposed to be cooked through. So we want to make sure we use the cornmeal. Oh, Lena says she's able to wash off and reuse the parchment paper sometimes. Yeah, I've never washed it, but I have reused it. So if I am making some cookies and I put parchment paper down and it still looks really clean, or sometimes I think this happens with granola. When I make granola, I will just save it and use it again. Yeah. Jean says sage might be a nice twist. Oh, in the cornbread. Yeah, put in there what you want. Totally. Susie asked, did you use dates and water like the original recipe, or just water? I just used water today, but you could use some non-dairy milk if you wanted to. Helen, thanks for that link. Yeah, there's cornmeal out there. It's just not easy. It just seems like the medium grind and the coarse grind are more in fashion nowadays. Oh, sweet potato puree. Lindahl's wondering, would it be appropriate? I've never tried it, but I think it would work just fine. Butternut squash, probably, that would work too, although I've not tried it. It does, oh, thanks Bethany. So Bethany says that the coarse cornmeal does cook through. I've made mine. Okay. So funny when you get something in your head and you're like, it has to be this. All right. All right, we are going to finish up with this chowder. Now, you can just eat this like this. It's ready to go. If you want more of a brothy broth, not a creamy broth, but I'm going to show you how to blend it if you want a more traditional chowder broth that's kind of creamy. So I am using my immersion blender today. You could also use a bean masher or a potato masher in your pot if you want to squish some of those potatoes a little bit. But I'm going to show you my immersion blender. This is a Cuisinart Smart Stick. If you do buy one of these, get one that the top comes off because it's much easier to wash. So it's got the little blade in there and just snaps on. And it's designed specifically to fit in your hand like this and to go right into your soup pot on the stovetop. Now, if you didn't have this, you could just ladle some into your blender, blend it briefly, and then pour it back in. All right, I'm gonna, the one thing about this cooktop that makes me nervous is it's slidey. So I definitely want to hold on to my pot while I'm doing this. Now, immersion blenders are very efficient. So it doesn't take long. And my technique is I kind of go up and down a few times and then I go around. So here we go. And I think I can turn this off now. Okay. And you want to make sure that that stays below the surface so you don't spatter yourself. See how that changed already? And I only did 4 little blends. So this is up to you, how blended you want it to be, how many chunks you want left. All right, that looks great. Yay! Isn't that amazing how much it changed? Just with a few little blends. And then you always want to rinse this right after because it's kind of hard to wash that if it gets crusty and dries on there. I'm going to go ahead and rinse that. Soups and stews are so great. There's still some potato chunks in there because you could just eat them for days. And if you don't like repeating so often, you can freeze it. It freezes well. Potatoes thaw a little oddly, but they're still totally edible. Isn't that pretty? I'd put a little black pepper on there, probably. All right, you guys, I think that is it. We did it. All right. So if you have any additional questions or any comments, feel free to add them. I'll be checking the comments later and I'll be replying to things for the benefit of people reading this later. What else? What else? Yeah, again, pick up the book if you're interested in more recipes. My recipes are, in general, the majority super easy because I love to eat more than I like to cook. So I want to get it done as soon as possible. And please leave a review if you've enjoyed the book on Amazon. And I think that's it. All right, guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you later. And this will be up on YouTube and Facebook later, so you can watch it again if you want. All right, thank you, guys. Bye.